find you very rude.
The Novympia channel is made possible by our gorgeous patrons who get access to the most unappealing crap you'll find anywhere on the whole internet.
Cue the snafu! If you go down to the woods today, sure for a big surprise.
Is that a threat?
Halloween-ish adjacent, isn't it? Teddy bear picnic.
I don't know if it is.
That's a creepy song, though.
Yeah, it's creepy.
The teddy bears are like animated. Welcome to this episode of Absolute Agony Halloween Special.
Yes, a very special Halloween edition. My name is Nova.
And I'm Olympia. I was not aware today that Nova was going to do a face, so I put this hat on. Which I think, well, I mean, if you're
It's
just
Halloween.
If you're not watching, you're just listening, I'm wearing an adorable hat.
It is very cute, yes.
Water on this table.
Do you know, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to make it to set today.
To set. You have made it to set.
Yes.
But for all intents and purposes, you might not be wearing any makeup at all, because you have looked a bit like that for the past, 2 weeks?
I've had the most horrific case of tonsillitis the last 2 weeks. Never had tonsillitis before. Really, really awful. Probably the most ill I've ever felt in my entire life.
With any luck, you won't get it again, because that was bad.
Hopefully. It was really, really
She
bad.
couldn't wake up, she couldn't get up, she couldn't move.
It was just, I was in just constant pain for like a week and a half.
Some of the things you did in that bathroom, it's not even worth talking about, Nova.
Well, I was surprised anything came out. I couldn't eat anything.
Okay. Smoothies, and like, our fridge was ridiculous.
It wasn't like a liquid diet.
It was, she'll try this. I don't really like it. Oh, fine. Fuck you. I'll stick this finger up my ass and I'll go and get you something else. I made a smoothie from scratch.
That was nice.
Thank you. Banana and coconut water it was. I didn't like it.
I thought it was all right.
That coconut water had a really weird taste to it.
Coconut water does taste weird.
They're weird. I didn't appreciate it.
What was it for you? Was it for me?
Usually on this podcast, and this is what number is this? 6?
6.
So it's the penultimate, because we have one sort of bumper edition left.
Yes.
Usually, Nova and I sit down and talk about the submissions that we've received regarding workplace issues of the heart.
This week we asked on Patreon, somebody suggested that we do like a Halloween edition, and I thought that was a great idea. So we asked people to send in stories, personal stories of the paranormal, of the unexplained, that they wanted our 2 cents on, that they wanted maybe our interpretation or advice on.
Advice? Get out the house. I don't know what advice we can give to
We
these.
had so many submissions. Would you consider yourself to be a believer?
I've said this a lot on my solo podcast.
Okay.
Full of shit. There's a spider outside that is larger than I would like. Is that a spider or
can
like
you
a
see it
flower?
outside?
I think it might be like a big flower, scary flower.
Okay.
I've said this all along. I don't know that you can, just in life in general, be fully skeptical about... Well, skeptical, yes, but just a firm non-believer in everything. I like to sort of keep a shred of an open mind about stuff.
I want to believe, and I feel like I have an open mind, but I've not experienced anything personally thus far in my life which has led me to be like, yes, oh my gosh, there's something else, 100%.
And that is really what it would take.
And if that happened to me, I don't think, I mean, your automatic thing is to try to rationalise it, but I think I would be probably more open to accept it than like the average person. Like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's just not happened.
Yeah. So I will approach everything, I guess, respectfully, because we planned on doing a like a sort of ghost hunting video. We've tried before, and it ended up being sort of a most haunted parody, because in the end I realised that trying to do it seriously with Kat, Megan, Shah, they're not going to take it seriously. They're going to poo-poo the entire thing. Kat wouldn't, but Megan and Shah would not be... they would not take it seriously. So I was like, we have to just make this into like a joke. But if we were to do it with someone who sort of does it, is sort of a paranormal investigator, I would approach it respectfully. I'm not going to go in and just be like, oh, this is fine. This is fucking bullshit. They've got like some hidden strings or whatever.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I don't think I believe in ghosts, Nova.
I don't think I believe in ghosts in the idea of there's like a actual conscious shadow of like a deceased person. Like it's actually them, it's their personality, it's their soul. I don't necessarily believe in that. I don't necessarily believe that like somebody can linger and then
like
have
Casper
some
the
kind...
Friendly Ghost.
Yeah.
Unfinished business.
But I believe, or not believe, no, I don't even know what I believe, but like I'd be more open to the idea of energies or
I'm open to
or
it.
spirits that don't necessarily have conscious like control over what they're doing, if that makes
But
sense.
somehow still stick around.
If there's like residual energy of like the deceased that could cause...
I'm certainly
weird
open
things.
to it.
If somebody passes with like a very strong emotion, I feel like that it makes sense for like that emotion to linger, perhaps.
There are enough things, I think, in life that I have noticed. Synchronicities or karma or, I don't know, a few things that kind of venture into the, requires a bit of belief. Mm-hmm. I've noticed enough sort of bizarre shit to retain an open mind for any conversation, really. Mm-hmm. So I'm the whole idea of ghosts I find very exciting. Anything,
yeah, it is exciting to think about paranormal.
It's thrilling. It's so thrilling. I'm very, very open to it. But again, yes, like you said, thus far there is nothing really to sort of tickle my tonsils. No, sorry, no offense.
Oh my god.
I like that on the Wikipedia article for ghosts. There's a lovely sort of etching of like a scary ghost. And then it says this sentence in the opening line. It says, the overwhelming consensus of science is that ghosts do not exist. Mm. I just think it's very, very final. And it's tricky to tread that line between, we are so believers in science and you're so rational and you don't want to, venture into like Kookyville. But at the same time, I think the word I want to use is respectful of people's beliefs. Just in general, you want to just do right by people, don't you? But yes, I'm very open to the idea.
What do you think happens when you die?
Unfortunately, I think your brain releases a bunch of chemicals, like gives you a sense of like a euphoria, and that's sort of it. I know it's really bleak. That's so bleak.
I like the idea of the kind of... In Final Fantasy VII, they have...
Nova.
No, listen to me.
Every time.
They have this thing called the life stream. And I like the idea that the planet has a finite amount of energy to give life. And whilst you're alive, you're just borrowing a part of that life stream. And when you die, you return to the life stream and it will go into something else. And that's probably why the planet is dying, is because there's too much for the planet to support, and that life stream has always remained finite. In the game, for instance, they start mining this as like an energy resource, and that's why the planet starts up. But I like the idea that there's like just a circle of like energy, and that we just borrow from that and then return.
But does that then mean you believe in reincarnation? See, I think reincarnation,
in a sense, in that, because you're borrowing that like life force.
That makes
again.
the most sense, I think. Almost that kind of seems to make sense.
That kind of spark that gives you, what's the word? Sentience.
Yeah.
That kind of spark that makes you a sentient being
has to go somewhere.
Kind of a little bit of magic, isn't it?
It has to be a bit. There's something. Listen, we're never going to know until. When you pass away. Betty White always said this lovely thing, and she was like, when she was asked if she was afraid of dying, and she said, well, we know everything there is to know, basically, in the world, apart from what happens when we die. That is still a secret, but I don't fear it, because when I die, then I'll know the secret.
Oh,
which I think is really a nice way of looking at it. But have you, so you've never experienced anything that you might be like, well, I'm not talking about like, the postman leaves a parcel behind your bin, and then it's gone, sort of thing. Like, is there anything that you've been like, okay, that was suspicious and weird?
No.
So I have one offering.
Sleep paralysis stuff.
That's just in your head, no.
But a lot of people take that really seriously.
That's just in your head.
A lot of people think that's very, very real.
But that's just not, though, is it? Sleep paralysis.
Like the visions people have during sleep paralysis, a lot of people take that.
They think they're real, or they just like read into it.
People don't necessarily think that they're having sleep paralysis. They think they're being like possessed by ghosts or demons.
Oh, I forgot to put an earring in. Okay, well that's obviously horrifying. I don't know. We should maybe just put a pin in that. I have one thing that is more sort of a poltergeist type thing that to this day I think about this all the time. I was in my childhood bedroom. I was about 15 possibly. And I had this big wooden sideboard in my room. And from the wall outwards, it was pretty wide. It was like a really huge, hefty thing. I think my dad might have even built it. It was really ugly. Sorry, Dad. But it was huge. And I had a TV on top of it. And it was one of those combi DVD TVs, you know, like early naughty. So it was a box. It was really, really heavy. And it comfortably fit because this sideboard was so big. This TV fit on the entire thing. It wasn't like teetering over the edge. So I was hanging out with a friend. I went downstairs because the friend was leaving. And as they left, I heard this almighty crashing sound. I was like, what the hell just exploded almost upstairs? So I ran upstairs. And this TV was on the floor, in the centre of the floor. There was no window open. Not that a window open would... what kind of hurricane would have to come through to blow a TV off?
Very heavy.
No one was in the house.
They used to have some rubber feet as well, didn't they?
It was so solid. There was no way. This thing, you'd struggle to pick it up. It was so heavy. And it was on the floor. And I stared at it for a good minute, trying to figure out. I was like... There's no one else in the house because I don't know if there was some disgruntled person in the house that was like, fuck you, and they pushed it off. There was no one there, it was just me. And this TV was on the floor. And I just picked it up and put it back and then just stared at it. And I was like, I have no real world explanation for why that TV
That's weird.
was on the floor. To this day, I have no idea what happened there. Did the whole house just suddenly subside? I don't know. But that was the one time where I was in the room and I was like, something pushed that TV off and I don't know what the fuck it was.
Genuinely can't explain it.
That was the one time in my life where I was like, okay, that was suspicious and weird.
That is weird.
I don't know if anyone died in that house. I have no idea. A few dreams died there. But I believe, Nova, we have some Leonards who are going to send our... Now, I'd just like to preface this, Leonards. If there's one of these in here, Nova, and you've selected the best ones, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a lot of these, and I'm going to be talking about the other ones that haven't made this episode in my solo podcast venture, which is on Patreon.
For you.
It's on Patreon. If you want to carry on this conversation, I'm going to try and make that really, really long.
I will say it was a little bit difficult to find these because I specifically asked people to put the header as Absolute Agony Halloween, and a lot of people didn't.
Yeah, but don't be rude.
So I had
no
to
one cares.
really scroll through.
I don't want any of these to be, well, I used to be a cab driver and I picked up this mysterious young woman. That same afternoon I picked up a man and he said, my daughter died 10 years ago. I'll sniff that a mile off. I don't want the licking hand one.
Are you ready for the first one?
Do you remember the licking hand one?
Yes, I remember.
I'm ready for the first Leonard. Okay.
Dear Absolute Agony.
That's us. that is us.
I have a bit of a paranormal conundrum that I'm hoping you can help with regarding a possibly cursed item that I own. You see, I have an old stereo with CD player that I've owned for 15 years. I purchased it at a charity shop, so it was already pretty old when I acquired it. I used the stereo system for years with no issues. In 2013, my grandmother passed away from natural causes.
No.
About a week after she passed, my stereo just randomly turned itself on. This had never happened before, and I thought it was odd, but thought nothing more of it. A few days later, the stereo turned itself on again. This time it seemed annoying, and I thought that it may be malfunctioning. I tried plugging it into a totally different outlet, just to be sure it wasn't something with the wall outlet. A week later, the stereo turned itself on again. Each time this was happening, it was just radio static, not a CD that played. At this point, I started to wonder if this was a spooky thing. I thought of my grandma and decided to just try talking to her spirit.
Just pause 1 second. Just so I'm caught up with this. CD player, stereo thing.
Yeah.
Presumably it had radio
Yeah.
as well, which explains the white noise.
They normally, if I'm imagining, they normally had cassette in the front, CD on the top, and
speakers,
also, like built-in
either
speakers,
side,
and it was
yeah,
radio.
yeah. Okay, and this is 15 years old, so...
But it was bought secondhand 15...
Could be even older then.
Yeah.
So we're talking about maybe a big, bulky, early 90s...
Late 90s,
early
yeah.
90s. Okay,
Yeah.
Proceed.
I thought of my grandma and decided to just try talking to her spirit. But first, I unplugged the stereo. I could not abide by random, possibly ghostly radio interruptions. I made peace with my grandma, told her she had my attention, that I loved her, and then asked her to please not mess around with the electronic devices in the house. After that, the stereo remained unplugged anytime I wasn't using it. A few years later, I forgot all about the experience and carried on using my old stereo again. I started leaving it plugged in all the time. It did so for years without another thought about it. Then, in 2016, my uncle passed away. A couple of weeks after his passing, the stereo turned itself on again, this time in the middle of the night. It scared the shit out of me because it wasn't static, it was a radio station. I didn't listen to the station, I just unplugged the stupid thing. I wasn't creeped out, but I did start growing suspicious. I eventually decided to just shove the stereo into a closet and not worry about it, but I've never had an experience like this before, nor have I had one since. It may be worth mentioning that I do psychic work professionally, but I am not a medium. I'm not experienced in working with spirits of all the dead. Fast forward to 2024. It's time for some closet cleaning and I need to get rid of this weird old stereo. I'm considering donating it to a charity shop. My question is, am I morally obligated to leave a note with the stereo to inform the next owner that it may be cursed or at least susceptible to haunting? Yours truly, Lady Leonarda, member of the Pacific Northwest chapter of the Novympia Cult Coven.
So the title of this story should be Probably Gay Woman Buys Stereo in a Charity Shop and Wonders Why It's Faulty. And then has the nerve to take it to a different charity shop, but throw it away. Throw it away. What are you talking about?
I want to say, first of all, that I don't know if I like the phrasing of it being cursed, because there's nothing about this that to me suggests the item is cursed.
Because that requires someone to have put a curse on it. Is that what you're saying?
Because a curse normally implies ill will from a specific person with ill intent for a specific reason. And this to me just sounds like the item, for whatever reason, is being used as a conduit for those close to you that have passed.
Well, first and foremost, I think I don't know how we're going to approach these stories. Do you firstly believe that this is possible, that Leonarda is being contacted or has been by her dearly departed grandmother and then uncle?
This kind of ghost activity, I've got inverted commas here, is the kind of activity where I'm more inclined to be on board, because to me this kind of makes sense with my own ideas as it just being sort of energies that are interfering maybe with electrical, and it's there's no messages coming through, it's just somebody has passed and now this item is malfunctioning and it's turning on and it's making static like that. That to me kind of makes sense.
You could buy into that. Don't tell me for a second we can't use our phones on airplanes because it interferes. If you're also going to say that a deceased spirit person can't then fuck up an old stereo. I wonder, so Leonard said that although they tried to communicate with the stereo, they didn't hear anything in the white noise.
They said that they communicated with their grandmother, not the stereo. They asked her to politely leave it alone, and it would appear that she did until the uncle passed.
But but they unplugged the stereo after they said that, though, didn't they? So that would
they started using it again, and that's how they were like, oh, it started to happen again when my uncle passed.
Maybe every time you use the stereo, someone dies. Maybe it's the other way around. You're causing their deaths.
God, don't say that.
Because of the stereo. Because
that's an awful thing to say.
Haven't you used this? This could be a cursed stereo. We're looking at this the wrong way around here. Is it a coincidence? So the idea of EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, used to keep me awake at night. I thought that was the single scariest thing I'd ever come across, and I hadn't heard of it until the movie White Noise. Have you seen the movie White Noise? No. First of all, don't bother. It was probably the most disappointed I've ever been in my entire life. It's so bad. I think it's Michael Keaton, Deborah Kara Unger. Anyway, but you understand the principle that it's hearing voices in white noise, and there was the trailer for this movie came along, and it's like, this is Ruth Baxter's voice on I remember her name, Ruth Baxter. That is literally her name. This is her voice, and there's a picture of her. And it was like she was like saying, "Get out of my house." There's this voice, which I mean, clearly someone has just recorded. Probably, I don't think this was like a real EVP. And then it was like, Ruth Baxter died in so-and-so. And my 14-year-old brain thought that was the scariest thing in the world. And there's several examples of this. Now, I tried doing this with my friend Al. We listened to white noise in my childhood bedroom. The same one, mind you, with the creepy TV.
Of course, nowadays you can get spirit boxes, can't you?
You can specifically...
They're like...
Well, no, a spirit box is slightly different.
Well, they go through different
radio
channels.
That channels through the frequencies, and it's supposed to pick up real voices that's being broadcast on different radios, and it's supposed to be sort of hand selecting. So it's using kind of radio presenters and stuff as like a conduit.
Okay.
Because it's not the spirit's voice, but it's the same sort of thing. But we tried doing this. We literally recorded for a few minutes. We spoke into the room, and then we listened to it back. And we thought, I mean, you know, we were young and foolish.
You wanted to hear something.
We wanted to hear something, but I thought I heard someone say Jesus really clearly. Did I ever do it again? Did I fucking not? Because I thought that was the scariest thing in the world. Do you find that creepy, EVP?
I mean, not as creepy as you do.
Yeah, I think, Leonard, you just should destroy the stereo.
I think...
Don't give it to another charity shop. It's clearly broken.
It's old. I think this is... I mean, God bless you for not wanting to waste, but you can recycle electronic devices. Nobody wants this. It's old. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, I wonder if you inform...
It was old when you bought it. Just get rid of it.
If you inform someone that it might potentially have the ability to, you know, provide communication, something like that.
Maybe somebody would want it for that reason.
Yeah, but then I think that's doing a number on someone, because what if they become obsessed with it, trying to contact someone, it doesn't work? Could be quite cruel.
On the internet, like ghost hunting groups that might be interested in taking it from you. It's like a donation.
Perhaps, yes, reach out to someone who is in the sort of paranormal investigation world and see what they would do with it, because they probably have received messages and requests like that before. They would know what to do. I wouldn't just take it to a charity shop with a post-it note on it that says haunted or something, because then, you know, those women have to go through, like, use nappies and all sorts. They don't.
I'm just thinking we met so many people when we went to Salem, Massachusetts, that would have known somebody that would be the right person to give this machine to.
Well, we went to a museum for Ouija boards, didn't we? And there was the guy there was something of an expert.
That gentleman would have been able to...
And he
had a home for this.
He had his museum set up, and there was a Ouija board in there with a note that was framed, and it said, "I don't want this. Please take it. You'll know what to do with it, but for God's sake, just don't use it." So, you know, people who are in that area of expertise will know what to do, and I'm sure you'll find a home for it.
But yes, it doesn't sound to me like it's cursed, unless you're going to interpret the activity in the way that Olympia suggested, that actually the use of this item is causing the deaths, which I think is a terribly cynical way to
Does
think
it
of
say
things.
that Leonard's grandmother passed away and then they bought the stereo? Was it the other way around at the beginning of this story?
The stereo started to mess around about a week after the grandmother passed.
So they had the stereo before she passed then?
Yes.
So I don't want to put that in your mind. Please don't listen to that. That's obviously ridiculous.
Well, that doesn't make any sense either, because why would somebody pass from natural causes? That's not a curse. Doesn't make somebody pass from natural causes, and then an uncle, who I'm presuming was elderly as well. It doesn't make any sense.
I think that we're getting into a weird area.
A curse would cause a very strange, unnatural, untimely death.
I think we're getting into a weird area here. Don't listen to that, but get rid of the stereo. And also, all the best with that little story there. I don't like that at all. We don't have anything in the house that's like a stereo, do we?
No, I used to have a stereo, but I got rid of it a little while ago.
I used to have an old one somewhere as well, but got rid of it because old technology. There's something really eerie about old technology in general. So
I think you just don't need it anymore. Well,
we don't need it.
We have like
it's sort
Spotify,
of dead technology, isn't it? So
I have a lot of CDs still. I have a lot of physical CDs, but I mean, my computer can play them, or the PlayStation can play them if I ever want to listen to them.
Yeah, and even then, you're not going to get white noise, are you? No. White noise, especially. Not even the sound of it, but on a TV you don't see as frequently as you do.
Because everything's digital now.
But did you ever sit
white
in
noise
front
is such an analog?
Yeah, but did you ever sit in front of white noise as a kid and look for shapes?
No.
We're getting into a very Candle Cove area.
I used to like when you could feel the static on the screen, though.
That's real poltergeist. We just don't live in the same world anymore, do we?
No.
I used to sit and watch static.
That's fucked up.
I think that makes sense for me now, though. Like, why I'm such a winner.
Okay.
Thank you for your message, Leonard, and all the best. Thank you for writing in.
next one is less of a story, more of a question, and I thought it would be an interesting discussion.
Okay.
Hello, girls. Welcome to Hotel Tina. Up until a few years ago, I was a practicing occultist. I wasn't a witch. I was a traditional ceremonial magician. I used planetary pentacles, the 6th and 7th books of Moses, the whole shebang. Think chalk circles, arcane seals, elaborate rituals. Very a dark song, very the ninth gate. I eventually stopped practicing as my innate skepticism was telling me that I was leading myself on. Despite this, I had several spooky experiences. My query is this: how much skepticism should a person employ? I doubted everything. I could never quite immerse myself in the process. It's like some part of my brain was always saying, good God, girl, get a grip. For example, I wanted to use the first pentacle of Jupiter to try and make some money. The next day, I found £20 on the street outside an Aldi. A few days later, I found a tenner on my way to uni. I managed to convince myself that nothing had happened and I was just looking for something to confirm it had worked. Confirmation bias in action. Was I being too sceptical here? Another time, I did something similar, and that night I went on a lovely date with a gentleman who paid for everything and sent me home with a bouquet of flowers. Was that magic, or just my hot and sexy body? How do you draw the line between believing in gullibility? How much evidence would it take to convince Nova that magic exists? Should I start reading tarot over Facebook? Kind regards, Leonardina Lexington.
I like that everyone's taking Leonard and just bastardizing it in some sort of way. Leonardina. Now that's very, very interesting, isn't it?
This person sounded like they were really into it, but ultimately weren't able to fully let themselves into it.
I think this way about like witchcraft, for example, and there's a lot of practices within witchcraft that, you know, a layperson who's incredibly skeptical, incredibly cynical would be like, oh my God, what are you doing? What a waste of time. But I feel like there's something to be said for kind of like making your own luck, or, you know, creating something which, even if we're looking at this from a real scientific point of view, is something of like a placebo. So it's kind of like, if you believe in it, you give power to it kind of thing. Even if it is all, you know, none of it works, absolutely none of it, which, if we're going to go down that route, also refers to any kind of religion. It's what you kind of make of it. It's the power you put in, I think you kind of get back a little bit. So, do I believe that a spell this person cast sort of gave them money, or, you know, was able to produce money on the street? Is there something to be said, for example, for like, if you cast this spell and it's on your mind and you put it to the back of your head and you just kind of think about it and you sort of really believe it's going to happen.
Subconsciously, you're more likely to spot money.
Are you now looking around for it? But then doesn't that mean that it kind of worked?
Yeah.
Because you are putting that in your mind. So whether there's actually any force, magical or otherwise, happening there, yeah, did it work? I don't know.
I feel like...
Who's to say? I don't know.
Witchcraft, a lot of rituals and spells that people cast is almost kind of a form of self-therapy. It's allowing you to process things that you want, process things that have happened to you in a calming, cathartic way. And like you said, perhaps open yourself up to the results that you want. It changes your brain in a way that you're probably more receptive to the things that you want, whether it's magic or just subconscious, who knows. I think the problem comes when you start to perhaps put too much weight on these things, and perhaps you start to blame them for not working, and then maybe in turn you could blame yourself for not doing it right, or X, Y, and Z. I think it's nice if it's just a little something extra and it's just on the surface and you're not trying to do life-changing things through magic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
If it's
I'm
a little
struggling to find the
bit
words
of self-help.
Yes.
You're not trying to conjure like fire raining down from the sky. It's more something to do with, you know... Well, I feel like a lot of witches or people who practice sort of in the occult, a lot of, I think, the underlying sort of practices or ideas in witchcraft is to do with kind of balance within kind of nature. It's like what you put out... What is the saying? What you put out, you get back threefold or something. So it's about maintaining a balance... And therefore not, you know, I'm not going to cast some kind of curse or evil shit on someone. So therefore, as an extension of that, just by way of life, I think it's absolutely lovely. And again, it's how it makes you feel. I think that it's very interesting when people, if you're, not in a very good place or something, and you'll say, oh, please send me good vibes and healing vibes and good thoughts and stuff. People think that's completely normal. But if you were to sort of do something wearing a cloak, people would be like, that's fucking weird.
So it's difficult to answer your question as to how much skepticism you should put into something, because from what we've just discussed, this spell or ritual, whatever you did to try and bring good fortune, worked. It just worked. Well, you're questioning whether it was just a coincidence or whether it worked. So I don't really know what the answer is.
I think you're perhaps someone that thinks in sort of finite spaces, and you could have perhaps considered being in the occult or, being a witch as some sort of journey, because you're not going to understand all of it straight away. It's something that you've kind of maybe learned. Maybe that's some sort of power in you that you could have tried in a different area.
There's so much
it's like
to be
a journey.
Said. There's so much to be said for how you approach things, the mental space that you're in when you approach things, and how differently things can go just from having a conversation with a person. If you are in a different headspace, the tone of your voice, certain phrasings can completely change the person's impression of you, completely change the entire conversation. And if that is going to be altered because you've done a spell previously and now you're going into this with a different approach, then for all intents and purposes, that has worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't.
Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't necessarily have to be magic. There is this kind of social science behind it.
Yeah.
But if the magic helps, if the magic gets you into that position, then it still worked.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of picking and choosing, because you said, they, went the whole hog, the whole 9 yards. There was spells and cloaks and chalk and symbols and runes and stuff. Maybe you don't have to, you can approach it sort of, meet it halfway. You haven't got to do the whole shit and shebang. It's what works for you.
It is, yeah. I would imagine it's a very personal thing. Maybe some people need all the bells and whistles to fully believe and for it to fully work for themselves. But some people might be quite happy just lighting a single candle and saying a few words, and that might be enough. That might make it real enough.
Do you know, if we're going to bring this back to drag, because that's what we know about, some people say that for them, they feel in it when their eyelashes are on. When they put the wig on, it's only until they get dressed. Some people feel it the second they sit down. They know that they're already kind of there. Mm-hmm. So it's what works for you.
Yes.
And it should be a feeling, and it should be something that keeps you or makes you happy.
Ultimately, I feel like Wicca, like any belief, like any religion, does require
belief.
Faith.
It requires it. Otherwise, if you don't have it,
faith. So if you don't have faith in what you're doing, then it's not going to work for you.
And we can't answer, essentially, can we? How much skepticism do you apply to it? Because that's completely your choice. It's what you believe in. It's how much faith you have. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It sounds not. I think I would keep your toe in and.
To me, it's no different to kind of like the self-affirmation mantras and self-help podcasts that you get. Like, it's a similar kind of just making your brain subconsciously think in different ways.
Yeah. Putting something out there, putting something kind of positive out there.
Yes.
People all do that. Send positive vibes. People do that. People do it in different ways.
If you are a positive, if you seem positive, it's extraordinary what a different experience in this life you'll have as opposed to seeming negative.
Mm-hmm. Are you a positive person?
Oh, I don't know. That's a loaded question, isn't it?
I think you could afford to, maybe cast a few spells. Although I don't know, I trust that you'd cast nice ones.
Oh.
Would you cast evil? You
No.
get it back threefold, bitch.
I wouldn't cast evil.
I think you could afford to maybe cast a spell for like a Happy Meal to appear or something.
Right.
You've never dabbled in any kind of thing like that?
No.
Go on. Yeah, you
remember when we...
here we go.
I think it was New Year's Eve, and we were at our friend's parents' house, and they had a bonfire in the garden, and a few of us took turns writing something on a piece of paper and putting it in the bonfire to leave with the previous year. And I genuinely cannot remember what I wrote. I cannot remember. But I remember thinking that felt so good to do because it was a physical thing. You could see it burning and it was just being left in the last year. I thought that was... I really believed
to that
in
idea,
that in the moment.
People say good. if you've broken up with someone or you want to say all this shit to someone without really telling them, write it in a letter and then burn the letter. It gives you that sort of catharsis moment. I think a lot of it is mental. A lot of it is going on in your head. A lot of religion is how you see it. If you're a religious person and
faith,
you choose to live a certain way that's very positive and very loving and like the correct way.
You're believing in something there's no scientific evidence for. You have to have faith in it.
It is all going on in your mind, but I wouldn't overthink that too much because just because it's going on in your mind doesn't mean that it can't then affect outside of your mind.
Yes.
I think that's probably where I'm at with that one.
I feel like don't overthink it. If it's working, it's working.
Don't overthink it. If it brings you joy and comfort, I wouldn't overthink it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't overthink it. I went through a phase. I don't know how old I would have been, about 16. I had just seen The Skeleton Key for the first time, and I thought that was the coolest, especially because it deals with hoodoo as a kind of magical practice that is largely based in it doesn't work if you don't believe it. So if you believe it, it'll work. So I guess,
that's like what we were just
saying. Ultimate kind of placebo, isn't it? Placebo, do I mean to say that? Yeah, I do mean to say that. You believe it works, it'll work.
Yeah.
That's a placebo, isn't it? So I did kind of dabble a bit. I tried to anyway with what I could find on the internet, which 2006 it probably wasn't that much, but I liked it, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. So Godspeed, and it would be interesting to know if you sort of go back to your what you were doing before.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if this has changed your mind at all.
Don't overthink it. That's where we're coming from.
Okay, this next person has sent us 2 stories.
That's cheeky.
They're short, but
are they related in any way?
No. Let me just read it.
Okay.
Hello, girls. I have 2 spooky stories for you. One happened to me, and one happened to someone I knew.
Okay.
The first story happened to my teacher when I was in year 10 at high school. Okay. For some context, I lived in Portland, Victoria, Australia. It was the first place the British settled in Victoria in 1834, so suffice to say, there's some old buildings around town. My teacher had recently moved to the town and moved into an extremely old house. Everything seemed normal for a few weeks, but then his young daughter, maybe 6, started having nightmares. And not just, spooky dream kind of nightmares. He would wake up to blood-curdling screams of his daughter. She would wet the bed in fear. It was horrible. When asked what the nightmares were about, she said there was a tall, thin man wearing a tall hat in her room.
No.
Sometimes he would be in the corner, sometimes he would be at the foot of her bed. So this went on for a while, until one day the nightmares apparently stopped. We asked our teacher, and he didn't know why. A few weeks go by, and our teacher comes into class one day, looking noticeably shaken and nervous. We asked what happened, and he shows us a photo. Apparently, he had been doing research on his house and found a photo in a history book of the people who built it. In the photo was a tall, thin man wearing a tall hat, just as his daughter described.
There is an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Something in apartment, something, I can't remember. But it is about a very similar situation where a woman with a very young girl, the young girl has an imaginary friend. She sees this woman consistently, and she describes, or the young girl calls the friend my Liz. She's like, this is my Liz, is my friend. And she's like, oh, is Liz here? Whatever. A decade or however much time goes by, and she finds out that there was a woman who lived in the house who was murdered called Mary Elizabeth, and her nickname was shortened to Ma Liz.
Oh,
and that is horrifying.
Wow.
That is so creepy, and I don't like it. But it's a similar vibe with this.
I wonder if the kid had seen this photo somewhere. Somehow.
Had the kid already seen
Somehow.
the photo, of course it could be a coincidence. If there's a lot of imagery. I don't know, maybe there's like a museum, or she's learned something at school about the town she lives in.
Or someone just showed her, like, this is your house, or something like...
Well, she will have been exposed to imagery of, like, men in hats if she's learnt about British people, landing.
Is it the same person? A tall, thin man in a tall hat could be more generic and commonplace than we are aware.
I mean, 1830, I'm assuming most people were probably a bit thin.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So that... It could just be pulling a false link there.
Yeah. And I also wonder, and I think this, possibly with the Netflix story, possibly with this, in the retelling of this story, does it sometimes get slightly bastardized as time goes on? In the sense that it's not quite... It may not have quite played out. I'm not suggesting you're lying in any way.
Did the girl give as similar a description?
Did she give a description? Did the father just make a connection there and then in the retelling say, oh, I'm sure she said it was like a tall, thin man in a hat. Maybe it could have just been man in a hat.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just like person in a hat. There's slight things that could have been exaggerated over time. So I'm not suggesting anyone's lying in this at all. I think that's just kind of a thing people do, isn't it?
It's not a watertight story.
Yeah, I don't think it's malicious that people, or, there's nothing nefarious.
It's natural to try and make sense of things that you can't explain.
Elaborate a bit as well. When you retell a story, don't you often find that you elaborate slightly to make it more interesting? Or, I don't know, you sort of contract things a bit so they're a bit more enticing. So, I don't know. However, I'm also not poo-pooing it entirely. I don't know. Don't you think aren't children supposed to be, I guess, a bit like animals? People say this about dogs, don't they? That they're more susceptible.
Cats can see onto more astral planes than humans can.
So children particularly are supposed to be more susceptible, aren't they? Is that true? Or is that because we think of, like, the Kid in the Ring or Poltergeist?
I think the idea is that children are more innocent and therefore see things with an kind of untainted point of view. They see things for what they truly are. Whereas adults are instantly more cynical, instantly have biases.
Which reminds me of, not quite the same thing, but the Ariel School alien incident. The idea was that the aliens visited the school to speak to the children because they would have been more open to listening to what they had to say versus adults that would have probably tried to shoot them down or something. So there is that. I suppose as well, children, like, medically can hear higher frequencies. They can hear and I don't know if they can see shit that we can't see being older.
Possibly.
But I wonder if there's a bit of that.
Everything just decays as you get older, doesn't it?
Everything. Yeah, well, that's true, actually, isn't it? So maybe there is something to it. I don't know. Either way, shit like that gives me the willies.
I'm sceptical of that one.
Do you remember ever having, like, a childhood friend?
No, I always wanted one. I was like, I don't understand how can people have, like, imaginary friends? I don't understand the concept of it.
I sometimes used to pretend I was speaking to Basil from Austin Powers.
That's really weird.
Basil Exposition. I used to pretend that I would, like, talk to him.
Okay, also, for you to be young enough to do that, you would have been too young to watch those films.
I was very, very young. I didn't know what the word shagged meant.
Right.
I don't think I knew.
There's another story in this submission.
That is not good though, is it? Do you know, as an adult, that would be even worse. Because if it was between two adults, you could be like, okay, let's think about this rationally. Do you need a holiday? Do you need a drink? What do you need? If you're the adult and the child is doing all this shit, they expect you to sort of protect them. And you'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Fuck off. Okay, what's the next one?
Okay, the other story happened when I was visiting friends in America. We stayed at their cabin in the woods. I know, already a great start to the story.
Okay.
They lived in the northeast, so not exactly in the Appalachian Mountains, but definitely in some mountainous area. So it's us and my friend's dog staying in this cabin, and the surrounding forest was so creepy. The creepiest thing about it was at night time, it was so dark and so quiet. We're there for a few nights, and occasionally my friend would go out the front to smoke, and I'd join him for the company. At that time, we couldn't hear anything. No animal noises, owl hoots, barely even the wind rustling in the trees. One night, when we were on the porch, we heard my friend's dog bark out in the forest, which is weird because we didn't remember leaving the door open. The dog keeps barking, so we start to walk towards the forest. We start calling out the dog's name. My friend's girlfriend opens the front door and asks us what we are doing. We say we're getting the dog. She then looks mortified and said the dog had been inside with her the whole time. Needless to say, we ran back inside and locked the doors. We're luckily leaving the next day because there's no way in hell I'd stay there any longer. Thanks for reading. What?
That's not really a story, is it?
Yeah, that they heard
an animal in the woods.
A dog barking.
Well, it might not have been a dog, it might have been something else.
After not hearing any animals for like the whole time they stood there.
Yeah, but they weren't in Mars. They were still on the planet, and there could have been someone who just happened to be walking in the woods that night with a dog.
I don't know. They make out like they're very like out in the middle of nowhere.
No, it still could have just been a person with a dog. They just heard someone else's dog.
I don't know.
That one to me, it just doesn't. I'm sorry, that doesn't really seem like much of a story. I'm not suggesting that wouldn't be terrifying, because if you did think you were on your own, and then you were like, oh my god, the dog's inside, what have we just heard? You would cack yourself and run inside, but I think you just heard someone else's dog.
I don't know, I feel like we would need more information for that, but I feel like...
What other kind of animal could make that sound?
That's too obvious. This person, I'm sure, would have mentioned that if that was the case.
I don't know. They could just be no author.
I feel like with the information we're given, we're led to believe that this is a very kind of like out in the middle of nowhere cabin in the woods, and they've explained that they haven't really heard any creatures previously.
But
so
okay,
to hear a dog of anything else is very strange.
I'm just trying to think about from what angle they're approaching this. I wonder what they thought it was. Did they think it was like some creepy wood person with a dog, and therefore it's like we're going to get stabbed in our sleep because there's some human out there with a dog? Or are they thinking it's some kind of like Wendigo?
Something mimicking a dog.
I mean, I don't know specifically geographically where like the idea of a Wendigo or something might be told in America, but I'm assuming
some kind of skinwalker.
Something like that. Do you reckon that's what they're thinking of?
Maybe.
What animal would make a dog like barking noise? Like a wolf or a coyote?
A dog.
Or a dog. It was probably just another dog. I'm trying to think about.
But that's also strange if they have dogs that they would let out. That's not safe if there's other animals like that in the wild, is it? So you think that like the owners of this dog would know not to let them out if there were like wild dogs or coyotes, or do you know what I mean?
But they didn't let the dog out. The dog was inside.
No, but they obviously had done in the past. That's why they thought, oh, the dog's out.
Did they? Is that implied though?
Yes.
That they had let the dog out? Well, I guess if it's safe for humans...
Because they're quite casual about it. We start walking towards the forest. We start calling out the dog's name.
Well, they must be...
There's no panic or anything.
They must have known the area to be safe or free from like bears. Because what are the kind of human dangers, apart from obviously getting lost or exposure to the elements, animal-wise? It's basically a bear and a coyote. Snakes.
Yeah.
I don't really know where the Appalachian Mountains... Is that west? I'm not entirely sure where that is.
Northeast.
Oh, wow. I really fucked that up. Yeah, I don't know. To me...
So you just don't rate this story at all.
I don't get it, because they just heard a dog.
And that's that.
I mean, unless you have anything else to add. I'm not suggesting that's not scary, because I would also cack, because you would be like, okay, we're now walking towards some unknown creature.
I feel like if you were in that position as it was happening, it would be terrifying.
Yeah. But then when you read it back the next day, you were like, well, it was probably a dog.
I don't know.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for that one. I love the first one. And again, you know, I don't want to come to set today to just crap on these stories because we're sort of a bit more skeptical. I don't think we have done that. I think we've been very respectful.
Yeah.
I just can't see this being much, this one, I'm afraid.
All right. Wow.
Thank you, Leonard.
Soz, Leonard. Okay, I've saved this one till the end.
In your mind, is this the best one?
I think so. I don't know. I wonder how skeptical of it you're going to be.
Were you spooked out reading it?
I just thought it was a really good story. It was interesting.
All right, hit me with it.
Okay. Hi, dears. Firstly, let me preface this email with the fact that I, being a reasonably intelligent human being, do not believe in ghosts hauntings, gods, etc. as a whole, I tend to look for the most plausible and realistic reasons and answers to situations. However,
I like that. That's good.
I do have a couple of instances while living in one house that had me confused. Over the years, we have lived in many rental properties and have recently just sold a house and purchased our final home. In all but one of these houses, I have zero complaints and nothing strange to report. This one house we rented, though, was a strange one. We moved into this particular house after living in an apartment for a while. It was a bungalow out in the countryside and had extra bedrooms and bathrooms and nice lawns. All was good. We now had the space for our child and to have friends over, and everyone seemed to like it at first. Then little things started to happen. Knocks at the front door, but nobody was there.
Just real quick, sorry to interrupt. Do we know where this is? Is this British, American?
Don't know.
Okay.
Knocks at the front door, but nobody was there. Things falling over off of shelves, the usual weird stuff. Our car alarm randomly started to go off at night, something that had never happened before. We didn't think much of it until one night our friend was over and both our car alarms went off at the very same time. Annoying, but not the end of the world. We didn't have close neighbours, but maybe it was just someone being irritating. Another night, as I was in a bedroom using our desktop computer, at the end of the hall, I heard someone faintly calling from the living room.
No.
I continued to play on the computer and heard it again, louder. It happened a third time, and as I made my way up the hall, the door swung open as my partner angrily said, "What? Stop calling me. The child's asleep and you know where I am." I snapped back saying, "I'm not calling you. It's someone up here." We argued over and back about who was calling who, but it was very late and our daughter was asleep, so we ended up just leaving it. But it was 100% coming from inside the house. A couple of weeks later, as we sat watching the TV, we heard a massive crash, like something big was being knocked over, coming from the baby monitor in our daughter's room. It sounded like a wardrobe or a dresser had been knocked upside down. We both ran down the hall and both headed straight for the bedroom and burst in the door to find her sleeping in a perfectly tidy room. We checked everything inside and out, but never figured out what that noise was. Again, maybe just interference on the monitor, but that was the only time it happened, and it was very strange. Shortly after this, my daughter then started to talk about the man.
No.
Petrified to stay in her own room, our daughter was now refusing to sleep in there. Many attempts to reassure her didn't work. She would run out screaming that the man scared her, or the man pushed her, or the man was in the wardrobe. Children can say things and act up, but it wasn't nice seeing her so upset all the time and afraid of her own bedroom. All this happening while babysitters and friends were hearing strange sounds and knocks, feeling like something touched them, feeling uneasy and cold in the house, eventually leading to them still calling over but to avoid sleeping over. One friend did end up staying, but halfway through the night came in petrified and slept on the floor at the end of our bed, claiming that scratches on the wall sounded like it was full of rats. Everyone was now uncomfortable in this house. It wasn't a nice feeling. Then came the kicker. I'm reluctant to even share this, as I'm fully aware of how crazy it will make me sound.
As if it gets worse.
Years of Google searches have yielded no results, and unless you were there, you would call BS. I know I would anyway. One night, completely out of nowhere, the entire living room ceiling started to what I can only describe as rain fire. I'm fully aware that this sounds ridiculous. It was almost like tiny sparks gently falling like snow, dropping very slowly. It only happened for 4 or 5 seconds, but it was enough time to look around the entire ceiling and panic. Running outside to check that the house wasn't on fire and grabbing our daughter from our bed, we then stood in disbelief outside, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Again, I know I sound like a lunatic, but they were friends with us and they were just as confused. I'm sure that there's an explanation for this strange incident. We have yet to figure out what that is. We moved shortly after this and have not had anything like this happen again in any other house we've rented or owned. Not a single thing. So my question is, what the actual fuck was that? Warmest regards, Leonard.
I don't know why you're emailing us. Email Unsolved Mysteries. Get someone... Have you spoken to anyone about this?
I've got one, cynical question about this story. And this might be really obvious to people, but it's not to me. And I'm just like, how old is the child?
baby monitor would have to be very young.
But can speak about someone being in her room.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So I don't have a very good
toddler
gauge.
could be.
Would you still have a baby monitor in their room?
I guess it would depend on if it was like a video one.
Because that's the only thing where I was a bit like that to me, not having children and not knowing like what the normal is. Like I was thought, is that an inconsistency?
There would be a period of time where perhaps a toddler sleeps in something that's crib-like,
but can speak enough to say there's a man in the room.
I imagine. I don't know if this is true, but it sounds to me like it's potentially plausible that if there was a toddler who is still young enough, that they would sleep in some sort of crib type thing, or a bed that has like a barrier on it, they wouldn't fall out of the bed.
I suppose if it's a big enough house as well, like a baby monitor for a child isn't that...
Yeah, because if the toddler can't get out of bed themselves, they would still need it and be able to say, come and help me or whatever. So I kind of get that. I just would love to know if this is America or the UK, because I feel like Americans believe any old shit.
I think it's very interesting that this sounds like a very gradual haunting that could just progress. This raining fire thing, to me, I'm not saying that it's not a supernatural cause, but that must have been... I believe you that it happened. It must have been an actual thing, and it sounds fucking dangerous. It sounds like an electrical fault. That sounds to me like sparks coming from dodgy, faulty wiring in the ceiling. That sounds really dangerous.
You would know
really,
the difference.
Really dangerous.
You would know the difference, wouldn't you?
If you've never seen that before,
sparks coming from, you're suggesting like a ceiling light.
Not necessarily. Just if there was dodgy wiring in the ceiling. If something had happened, if something had gotten damp, or... And I'm not to say that couldn't have been caused by something supernatural, like setting it off, but like that to me sounds like you should have had an electrician over to do like a survey or something. Really,
maybe they
dangerous.
did. Maybe they did.
Because
we don't know that they did.
That's going to start an electrical fire.
But it sounds to me like what they're describing is a combination of like sparks and a flash fire type situation that is quick, because they said it was like 4 or 5 seconds.
I was imagining just like sparks.
I'm imagining like Mariah Carey hits a high note and sparks fall down behind her. Yeah. Like that moment. But what was the actual description? Can we get the description of it again? The fire, the raining...
So they said it was almost like tiny sparks gently falling like snow, dropping very slowly.
See, that's bizarre, because sparks would just they'd be gone, wouldn't they? They fly across and they're gone.
I can only describe as rain fire.
Falling gently is real creepy.
For 4 or 5 seconds.
It's almost like, you know, when like a beam of sunlight comes through a room, through the window, and you can see in the light little particles of dust flying around.
Get illuminated, yes.
It almost feels like there was a real specific angle that maybe... I don't know. Oh, it's so hard to sort of think about it logically, but like if someone shone like a car headlights through the living room window or something at a sort of angle.
I suppose sparks don't fall slowly; they fall.
That's what I mean.
Fast.
Up until that point, everything that you've said is, I guess, from having seen a number of horror movies, and that's really where all we're getting this from. It seems very stereotypical, or there's a lot of stuff in there that you'd be like, all right, we've seen that in movies. Stereotypes come from somewhere. There's a whole bunch of different things you can ascribe stereotypes to where you're like, yeah, but they come from somewhere. Yeah. Why is a UFO always like a saucer shape?
Yeah.
Is that because people really saw a whole bunch of them and that's sort of permeated through people's consciousness?
But yeah, that last bit I thought was so interesting.
Is nuts. That is nutty. And they don't live there anymore, do they?
No. So they said... I think they moved pretty soon.
Yeah,
afterwards.
Because they were like, that's the only house we've ever had.
We moved shortly after this. Yeah. So it was a rental property as well, so it wasn't their own property.
I mean, I don't know.
So let's just summarise all the activities. So we had...
What was the first thing?
Things being knocked over.
Yeah, classic.
Knocks on the front door, but no one there. The car alarm's going off.
The voice.
The voice is really fucking fucked up. That's really freaky.
Sounds to me, and I'm not
voice calling out.
I'm not suggesting you're lying at all. But this sounds to me, apart from the fire coming from the ceiling, although fire is still part of it, is like the plot of Paranormal Activity. Because you can tick off every single thing on that list. things moving, scratching sounds, a voice coming from the hallway.
Well, I mean, that's just general
fire.
poltergeist behaviour, isn't it?
But that's what I'm trying to suggest here. Paranormal Activity was a demon, wasn't it?
I don't remember. I'd quite like to rewatch that, actually.
I've seen it quite a lot. I believe it's
I think I've only seen the first
a
two.
demon. The third one sucks. Don't watch the third one.
Yeah, but I kind of like to watch...
Do you know, I think the third... I don't know why there are so many horror movies. Saw... Oh, no, Saw's not an example. Insidious, terrible. The third one. The Conjuring, the third one, terrible. Paranormal Activity, third one, terrible. Wouldn't bother. But it's definitely a demon. So this, to me, unfortunately, it does sound more demonic than ghost.
The fact that the child is seeing a man who is scaring her, it doesn't sound good, does it?
I mean, a ghost... The fire also kind of alludes to... There was a fire in Paranormal Activity. The fire, I think, it does allude to it more being a demon. The voice almost kind of mimicking someone.
It just sounds like something nefarious. The knocking at the door, the car alarms, it's all just very much
because
like,
a ghost,
I'm here.
A ghost might be someone who wants to communicate with you or is sad or confused. If that's the general idea of a... I mean, of course, there could be like a malicious ghost, but aren't demons supposed to be like taunting you and provoking you and trying to scare you? Versus a ghost might not necessarily be. They might just be kind of like lost souls.
I feel like most pop culture interpretations of demons in terms of hauntings would say that a demon is trying to wear your mental health down to a point where you're susceptible to being possessed.
Yeah, that makes
trying
sense.
to terrorize you and just wear you down so you're weak enough for possession.
But then I suppose the thing that...
Because demons want a physical presence in this world.
Yeah,
they don't have that.
The difference there, though, is that demons will haunt you. They won't necessarily haunt the house. So in moving, isn't that the idea? It's not going to get rid of it. Whereas a ghost might haunt a house. You can leave the house and you're kind of good to go, but a demon will kind of follow you.
I think that differs from
might differ.
Movie franchise to movie franchise.
All have ideas about ghosts and demons, etc. And maybe some of it's true, maybe some of it isn't. Maybe there isn't like a one formula for everything situation. My immediate thought is demon, unfortunately. You've got a demon, congratulations.
I'd love to know...
I don't like it, though.
If you'd be able to contact whoever is currently living there now, or if you'd be able to find anything else about people that lived there after you, if they experienced anything strange. Or before you even. That's what I would be doing. I'd be trying to research who has lived there before, who has lived there afterwards.
Absolutely would do the research. You'd have to really think about a very sensitive way of telling the person. We said this, didn't we? We did the Grim tour. Might have been the second one. I can't remember. But we visited I think it was like a fast food kebab shop.
Oh, yes.
Where there was a murder took place in the back in the 80s, maybe. And we had that conversation about, would you want to know? Would you want to be told that kind of information? If it's a place of business, you might not be as bothered, possibly, because you don't really live there. But if someone knocked on the door and was like, oh, God, you know that specific room at the back? Yeah, that's where I saw a demon, or that's where I was... I'd be like, you son of a bitch... How could you be so mindlessly cruel to say something? Because now every time I go in there, I'm going to be like, it's going to sort of affect the way you think. So how would you go about, let's say, our previous house?
You could ask... Oh, just keep smudging my mouth.
You could
ask the landlord, because you're not a tenant anymore.
You could ask a landlord.
Just say, out of curiosity, hi, not spoken in a long time, but just out of curiosity, have you ever had complaints or stories from tenants about that property? Because we have...
Well, that works if there is a landlord involved. If there's no landlord involved, if they own the house...
Well, it was... Oh, if they own it now. If they said it was a rented property when they lived there.
Okay. Well, that does make
when
it
they
slightly
lived there, they rented
easier.
it.
I wonder if they... Yeah, so you'd find out who the landlord was, and you'd say, did anyone actually ever say anything to you about there being some
I think that would be the first place to start. Also, maybe local newspapers.
I wonder if they Googled... Did you Google this fire ceiling situation?
Yes, they said they couldn't find anything.
I suppose, again, like we said, it might not be one size fits all. Maybe this just hasn't happened to someone else, or someone it has happened, but they haven't found the need to talk about it or write about it somewhere. So there wouldn't be any sort of record or evidence of it.
Could it not be maybe like dust being shaken loose on the ceiling and then being illuminated in a weird way from like the lighting in your room?
Thinking, because the way that they described it falling slowly, it sounds to me like dust, the way dust falls.
And then maybe there's like a certain light or something in your room that was catching it in a weird way.
There could absolutely be a... Let's try and break down every single thing. That could be absolutely something weird.
Was there asbestos in the ceiling?
A weird illusion. It could be a trick of the light. Yeah. Some kind of illusionary thing is going on there that you're just looking at it from a weird perspective, and it looked like fire when in reality it was just like dust that was being illuminated. Sure. Rats in the wall. If your friend didn't live...
Scratching sounds.
If your friend didn't live there, maybe they weren't privy to the fact that your pipes sound a bit funny sometimes when they run, or maybe there was like a wombat outside or something. I don't know. Could have been. Sounds in the wall. The one that really gets me is the voice, because how would you explain that? If both the partner upstairs and they thought it was each other doing it. That I don't like at all. Could it have been the kid?
It's also strange to think that it's like a bungalow, so it's not like you're hearing neighbours or something.
Oh, wait, yeah, it wasn't upstairs then, was it? It was like down the corridor, because it was one floor. Could it have been your child, if your child is old enough to talk to you about I saw a man?
They said the child was asleep.
But how did they know that, though? If they're in a bedroom on their own, they could have been talking...
Well, you would hear that on the baby monitor, wouldn't you?
But in that instance, was the baby monitor on?
Well, I imagine situation. If the child was asleep, you'd have the baby monitor on, wouldn't you?
Maybe they're not great parents.
Right.
And they forgot.
That seems to be a...
Maybe they forgot that one night. You might forget one night. I don't know. That one's hard to explain. I have a family member who I always thought... I don't know them very well, was never particularly close to them, so I can't really comment on it. But who once, I remember my mother finding it really amusing, had a priest come over because they said that their kitchen cupboards would not stop opening on their own. They just kept doing this constantly. And I think possibly changed them and, had things in place to stop them from doing that. And they were so frustrated with it that they were like, I don't know what the fuck's happening in my kitchen, but shit is just moving and these doors keep flapping. So I'm going to get a priest over to kind of like have a look or bless it or something. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what happened with that situation because it was a long time ago. But it's funny to consider someone who, like the opening comment, super skeptical, don't believe in any of this, don't believe in any of that shit.
Until it happened.
Until it happens. Yeah. That is so scary. What would have to happen? Like, imagine if there is something that happens in our lives that suddenly we do believe in something like that.
That would be enough for me. That if
would do
all of those things, that would be enough for me. I'd be like, fuck this.
Well, we thought we saw a UFO, didn't we? That's inexplicable.
The one
but
thing
aliens
that was
are much easier to believe than ghosts and demons.
Are they? I think like some people might not agree with that.
Yeah.
I more believe in aliens. I mean, I do believe in aliens, so...
Well, demons and ghosts have to rely on believing something which there's kind of no proof of. Whereas aliens could literally exist. They could.
That.
We just haven't found them, or they haven't found us, or maybe they have and we don't know.
Scientific theory to support.
Yeah, so I think aliens... Because I think a lot of very rational people would believe in aliens. Mm. But we thought we saw once a light driving home that moved about the sky. We did literally see it was a red light in the sky. At first, I think we thought it was like a searchlight, spotlight, one of those premiere
there
things.
Was searchlights as well, like on the horizon at the same time.
They were
on the horizon.
They were in a different area, and they were different colour.
But I remember thinking that was strange. They were more like just a normal
white light.
But then this thing was hovering above us, and it was like it was
red,
matching the speed of the car. And I thought it was a reflection, so I stuck my head out the window.
Yeah, we thought it was on the windscreen.
It was still there.
But then it moved around at such a force, such a speed that seemed very unnatural, and in different sort of... It wasn't just like a straight line. It sort of darted around a bit, and it seemed very bizarre. And we were literally staring at it. I mean, I was staring at the road, 10 and 2. But that was very much like are we witnessing something flying above us?
What actually is this?
And sure, it could be some military thing. It could be a plane. It could be someone with a laser somewhere. But it just didn't feel that way.
It could be a laser, but it was very odd.
It didn't feel that way to me because it seemed like it was
could have been a laser hitting a cloud.
Could have been.
But in that moment, I couldn't explain it.
And it's things like that might make you... I don't know. I feel like people who are maybe slightly less skeptical and a bit more open to things like this are perhaps just more pleasant people because they're not as NASA's all bullshit. You're just out of your mind. Oh, grow up. It was obviously just this. Grow up, girls. Do you know what I mean? I don't want there to be anything that changes our minds completely to the other side of ghosts are real, demons are real.
But I'm not pig-headed enough to be presented with evidence and ignore it.
Yeah. There could very well be a lot of things in there. It could be a mix, couldn't it? Maybe some of the things you wanted to see to back up. I heard a voice, therefore the scratching in the walls is also the same thing.
You start connecting it all.
You could have heard a demonic voice and it was just pipes in the wall. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean it was all something. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean any of it was. But I am sorry that happened to you. I hope you don't think about it now. But I'm going to have to know if you contacted anyone who lived there before or after.
Yeah, if that happened to me, I would want to know more.
The thing that makes me... Actually, I don't see as very good evidence at all is the fact that both car alarms went off at the same time. Suggests that there was like a change in atmosphere or like a temperature drop. Maybe there was some kind of weather phenomenon that might also explain the ceiling fire. Something like a ball lightning event or something very rare that may have occurred there.
I don't know, that sounds a bit like we're grasping.
Well, but do we think that if both of the car alarms went off at the same time, it's because there was a kid outside who just like with a bat just went and hit them both?
Well, possibly.
Could also explain the knocking at the door.
Well, that's what they're saying. Like, at first, they put it down to kids. They put it down to, like, a nuisance neighbours at first. Okay. But it's the combination of everything that then makes you go back and go, oh, actually...
Was it a kid or was it...
Yeah.
The knocking on the door is unacceptable.
Yeah, that makes me think of, like, something trying to...
I wonder how much you talk about it with your partner, if it's now something of a fun anecdote to tell at parties, or if it does sort of bother you. And if you're therefore slightly more likely to notice stuff, just out of being cautious. I feel like I would. If I'd gone through something like that,
I'd be quite paranoid.
You'd be slightly paranoid, wouldn't you? I wonder. I mean, I hope you're not, because obviously that's a terrible way to live. But I wonder if you are just because you can't help it, or you just put it to the back of your mind. Because there were certain ways in which that was worded where it seemed like you weren't over it quite. You were a little bit unhappy about it, which you would be, wouldn't you?
It must be frustrating as well as somebody who considers himself to be a logical person, somebody who considers himself to not be a believer. It must be frustrating to then be presented with something like this.
Because you don't want people to look at you like you're a lunatic.
Yeah.
I get it.
Interesting.
Oh, it's not nice, is it?
Well, that I could watch.
That was a great one. Congratulations, you've got a demon. Unless it was just your toddler child just being really creative.
Possibly.
Creative.
Creative.
Yeah, I don't know. Thank you for writing in, though.
Yes,
if you'd like to follow up in time for... In 2 weeks, we're doing the final episode of Absolute Agony for this season. Will we come back again? Only time will tell. But in the final episode, we're going to be talking about some of the Leonards who we've caught up with after we've spoken about their stories and given them advice, finding out what happened.
A few and do like a where are they now?
Where are they now? Leonards Revisited. So if you are one of the Leonards who we've read stories from, I'd quite like to hear specifically from the Leonards from this episode. Please email us.
And I may be reaching out to people specifically that I would like to hear from.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that. That'll be in 2 weeks' time. Like I said, head over to patreon.com/Novympia if you would like to listen to Full of It, Full of Shit, which is just me on my own. But it is a conversation over there. There is a community. And in the last Sunday of October of this October, I'm going to be reading a whole bunch of other stories that you've sent us in that haven't made this episode, which Nova is saying the less good ones. She hasn't said
I've
that.
just picked the
She's
ones
just
that I thought
cherry-picked.
would make.
But I'm going to go through some of the other ones, and I'm going to try and make that an extra long bumper edition. So I'll see you over there. But thank you so much. Thank you, Nova, for sitting down with me today for that.
Yes, you're very welcome.
I appreciate
I'm still
it.
only at about like 80% like health, so
Yep, the face doesn't help.
made it through. Yeah.
Made the effort for everyone at home. Which
If
is
you're
very, very nice.
watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever you can listen to podcasts, please give us a rating and a comment if you're able to. That would be lovely.
That'd be lovely. Yeah, that'd be nice.
All our social media will be in the description. You can just find us at Novympia everywhere.
Yep,
basically.
yep. I guess
Yeah.
that's probably it. We'll see you with the next one, won't we?
Yeah.
I've been Nova.
Not even asking for submissions now because we're at the end of the series.
Also, I've not been Nova. You were supposed to correct me.
I don't.
We're not asking for submissions anymore. That's it. Maybe we'll put a call out if we
season
get
2.
picked up for season 2. Maybe we'll get picked up. I don't know. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Alright,
All the best.
goodbye.
God bless.
And a happy Halloween to our newest patrons, Kay, Hoth Jawa, Sivan Him, and Fruit Loops.
You say God bless a lot.
God bless.
Yeah, because it's so stupid. It was like we were talking to that one at the beginning, and they were like, magician, and you were like, God bless.
Join the Patron, we'll do a shot of Patron.